There is so much information out there. At least get knowledgeable enough that, as they say, so you can be dangerous, because that's what you need, which just means you can question everything that's in front of you.
All right, guys, welcome to the BloomX podcast. Major announcement, we have a new sponsor, Tornet. Shout out to Dikshant, who came on our 14th episode of the podcast. He loved what we're doing so much that he wanted to show his support. Tornet is a great team for anyone looking to outsource their technology to, by the way. They work with a lot of startups. They work with a lot of full-form companies, organizations, universities. I've seen them do a lot of great work. So this is how they describe themselves. Tornet is a team of technology priests operating across 2 continents who preach the power of technology to make a meaningful difference in their customers' ecosystem. They're a powerhouse of technology enthusiasts who believe that business value chains can be improved with the help of technology solutions. So if you're looking for any kind of solution to get built out, any technology solution, definitely reach out to Tornet. They're a great team. Jeff, thank you for coming on the show. This is the BloomX podcast where we talk to founders, professionals, and just about what's going on in the innovation economy and what's going on, especially in Toronto. Yeah, just make yourself comfortable there. So you are a really interesting figure because you're running the OPN network. We'll talk a bit more about what that is. I'll let you talk more about what that is. But that's where we met, where you ran pitch competitions at City Hall. You got all these cool companies who come out and pitch. And one of the really cool things about the competition is it's the venue. You're at City Hall. It's such a serious feel to it, having been on the other side of being a founder, having that kind of experience of being able to pitch like that, having someone seem like your idea is so serious that you go to City Hall and talk about that. It seems so empowering. So I really want to get you on board to talk more about what you're doing and what OPN is. And if you want to start, you want to jump in?
For sure. Well, I thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you guys did come out to the event and enjoyed it and tied us up here to come in because we're always excited to talk about what we're doing and how we're helping startups. So I guess to give you kind of a little bit of a background, we started OPN about 4 years ago.
Yep.
And it started because I kind of went through this time where I had done a lot on my own on a software side. I have a software company and have been running that for maybe at that time it was 8 years, give or take.
This is your own company?
This is my own company,
you
software
started?
company. So we have offices in Pakistan, Philippines, and in Toronto. And I kind of started to see the same reoccurring problem, which was startups trying to get into a space and not being successful, not making it all the way through and having a little bit of issues with, as you call them, sharks.
Yeah.
And so as I was going through this, I was investing in early stage companies. And some of them had come back to me and said, hey, we really could use some help with our pitches. And interestingly enough, it didn't really dawn on me right at the beginning when they asked me this question, like, why are they coming to me? But I guess because I was investing, they saw there was a bit of both on both sides. So they said, came back up again, hey, could we really help us with these, getting ourselves ready? And it never really clicked, and I just started kind of working and said, yeah, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? And at the time, we were running this podcast show, interviewing founders and CEOs of companies and trying to connect them so it was an easier sales process because startups were finding it tough to get in front of big companies. So we'd say, here's your industry. I'll get you 3 CEOs or 3 people in the space, and we'll tie it together and talk on hot topics. So as we went through, we started to discuss, well, how can we help these startups that we invest in to get face time? And one of the places that we work at and invest in had the once a month Thursday night drinks. And you could do whatever you wanted as long as you brought people in to test the market to learn about their space so that maybe they want to be a member. And there was one coming up in 5 days or something.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, why don't we run an event? We'll bring in some advisors, we'll give feedback, we'll bring the startups that we invest in and they can pitch. And we'll work with them real quickly and get them ready. And that's what we did, create a meetup group, and 60 people showed up. And they said, we really like what you did here, you should do this again. And we had just done it once thinking, it's cool, good one-time thing.
Yep.
And 55 shows later and 4 years later, we've built out a whole series of events that help early stage companies get in front of investors, while at the same time, I started to go into more of the syndication, which was working inside of all these different angel groups. So I'm part of 6 different angel groups where I'm on the screening committees, which help facilitate where the startup has come in and get them into their investment community, and took those learnings back, built them into what we do so that we can better prepare early stage companies for investors so that they'll get faster investment. And then we've created a couple vehicles inside of that, which we'll get first time companies pitching, we'll work with them to get them ready. There's no cost. And this is all done as a way, was part of my helping and give back to the community, since I had been in doing this for so long already.
Yep.
And thought, you know what, I'm really better at helping than I am at building my own things. I enjoy it, it's fun, but I like to keep everything small and tight and doing its thing. Whereas everybody else wants to be a big company, why don't I help everybody be a big company and grow that? And that's what we did. So we created two vehicles, which are our pitch series, which is broken down into now Skip the Line, which is our investor meeting, and one coming up on November 12th. And we have 10 companies that are groomed and well ready for pitching. I'd say 90% of the companies that come in have never pitched before, never gone through the system. So we're getting a lot of companies come all over the world to pitch. And we see about 100 to 150 companies a month.
Wow.
And then we kind of work with all of them at some capacity and then get the 10 best over a 2-month period. And they will come pitch at Skip the Line. And they're in front of 5 advisors, which are all different angel groups for screening. So now we can syndicate the great companies into the angel groups. They'll take the ones they like, and then they'll get them in front of their community so they get investment. The top 2 companies then go to our City Hall event, which is the one you attended. And we were able to, at City Hall, really build the ecosystem around showcasing these startups. So we have a showcase where there's 20 companies. And now we've changed the whole setup. So on November 19th, we're going to have a whole new business model for startups where we're going to have the 2 companies pitch, a keynote, a panel on a topic like hardware or security, whatever that might be.
It's amazing.
And then there's going to be breakout sessions.
Yep.
So instead of a 3-hour show, it's going to be an hour-and-a-half show, and the rest of it will be networking so that you can network with big clients, like big business. So they're going to be in the room now because we made it all about startups. So now they're going to be able to find the right partner to help them grow their business. And then you can go see all the showcase of the companies. And then on the outskirts, we have all of our little or smaller events, which is for first-time pitching. Even if it's not your first time, you get practice. And that's with York, Y-Space, Seneca College, and Helix, and Durham College. And so all of these are facilitated inside of their space. And we're looking to, hopefully, maybe in the next year, expand and do one in Montreal and maybe Vancouver. And again, this is all about the startup community, helping them find a place to get ready and get in front of investors and raise funds.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
That was a
you gave me,
mouthful, eh?
yeah, you gave me a lot to digest there, right? I mean, from where you began and how you got to this point. How long did that take? Like, what does the journey look like?
Fascinating enough is that when I was working with these startups, I started to think to myself, why is this so easy for me? Why am I enjoying it? And it's not a hassle and it's not hard to sit down and help a business understand the fundamentals more and really align their pitch. And I started to kind of think about this. And years earlier, when I worked at Loblaws, this was back in between 2001 and 2007, I worked in Loblaws. And I went from a developer side to running their e-commerce platforms. And when I worked there, I did work a lot of hours because I loved what I did, but nobody knew what I did. So a lot of the front end people that would take the calls and things like that, administrative staff, they didn't know what I did, but they knew I was sitting online. So they would send all of the startups that would call them to me. And I made sure I met with every single company.
Awesome.
And then I would work with them to get them into Loblaws. So I literally built a whole network of all of the vice presidents, SVPs, and then I would book meetings with them in the startup and integrate them in. And I would work with them on their pitch deck, make sure that it was ready so that when they actually got in there, they were able to succeed by selling through to that vice president. Even though that senior exec had no idea why I was in the room, but I was helping facilitate technology and startups into big business. And then I kind of just kept doing that all the way through. So when I started this, it seemed so easy, and it was only because I had been doing it for 20 years. So how long have I been doing it? I've been grooming for 20 years. Absolutely. But really, we've put 100% effort in the last 3.5 years.
So, I mean, let's talk a little bit about that before we jump into this. So So you were at Loblaws, pretty much in corporate development at the time, and these startups started coming into your pipeline, and you're like, let's start meeting with them. So generally, when people think about these working with large corporations, it seems like it's a Goliath. Like, why would they care about me? How could I even approach them? Not knowing there's people out there like you looking for these startups to come in, almost like solutions to problems that you already have or don't even know you have, that you can now look at and plug and play, right?
Yep.
Almost into your solutions. Is that where it came from? You see these startups as like problem solvers for Loblaws, you being the connector to the rest of the company, you're now solving problems for Loblaws. Was that a career move?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. When I first was on the development side, we were solving your own problems, building your own code, and working around to make things work quicker, faster, and more productive.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, at one point, my role changed, and I was now on building a team. I was just one at the time, and it was solving problems, and it was coming up with ways to make, if a power outage occurred, how do you make that a better process internally so that when you had abandoned carts in the store, that people could actually go through and still check out when there was a power outage, because on average you have many power outages that occurred throughout stores across Canada. Other problems were things like we had battery backup when your refrigeration units went down.
Yep.
They need to solve that problem. Other ones where our managers are spending too much time in the office and not enough time on the floor. And which was kind of cool is that this was back in 2003, 2004. We actually came up with a form factor mobile phone that combated against the BlackBerry phones with IBM. And we had like a nice little fanny pack, and you could slide this little mini computer out, and it was a phone. It did everything. It checked your email, but the thing cost $10,000. So when I pitched the executives at Loblaws and said, we got a solution to keep everybody going, no one looked at that as being like, hey, this could be the future of work. We just looked at it as this was the future of store managers. Yeah. And my God, we built an iPhone. We literally built a supercomputer on a mobile phone. It was about this big, and it held just like a phone, but it did everything you needed, email, all of it.
Wow.
And they basically declined the project and said, for 10 grand, we'll allow our managers to keep working in their office. Yeah. But imagine if they would have done that. We would have had the first tech that actually allowed you to walk around the store, answer phones, checking email while walking, and this was back in 2004. So it's pretty cool. Obviously, cool. I never foresee I didn't at that time. I was probably too young, but man, there was some pretty cool stuff. And that obviously built into startups coming in too, because they were coming in with solutions. And while I was finding solutions for different areas, I was able to take the startup solutions and integrate them in. And I did have, at the time, we had a lot of trouble with it because big business wasn't so open to early stage companies because they thought they were going to fail all the time. So they had a bad experience. So one time I remember one of my bosses saying to me, and I think probably this is what gave me the drive to push forward too, is that he said, we're not here to build their business. And I kind of thought, that's the mentality of big business, but that's going to change one day. Yeah. And it has. 20 years later, or 15 years later, everybody wants to be a startup. Everybody wants to be working with startups. Because they see that they're solving little problems, and there's a lot of value that comes out of them.
So that's really cool you saw that transformation. So generally that's what people think about when they go to these big companies, like, why are these guys going to help me build my business? Or they're going to try to absorb me, or copy what I'm doing and just replicate it. If they're so big, they can just throw some resources at it. Has it ever been the case where that's ever happened, where your executives at Loblaws were like hostile to the idea? Right? I mean, you mentioned before like the thing was too expensive, but was it ever like a career decision where you have to be like, if I bring this in front of people, it might be a risk, but I got to do it anyways?
For sure. There was always that fear, and I think at this time it's the big business versus small business, them not understanding each other. Yeah. So I think there was this fear that a startup always felt that big business was going to take their idea and build it themselves because they had the money and they had the power to do it. But when you really get behind the hood of it, big business doesn't have time for that. Yep. They're building arms, they're building their own business strengths, and going in and building a widget or building something that they feel is too small, it may solve that initial problem, but then they don't have somebody to head it up. And when you look at a large business, it really is a whole bunch of small businesses run inside of a business that eventually build staff and they build executives on top of those layers. So they start off as something small, an idea, and they grow it So there are lots of business. There are thousands of businesses in Loblaws running one big business.
Yep.
They just all fold into one. So all those ideas come up to it. So technically, we're all entrepreneurs. Big business may not want to look at it that way, but that's really what they are. And when someone, as a small company comes around, that creative idea comes from them seeing the problem of a big business or somebody else not doing it very well. So they see that problem, they create it, they build on it and grow it, and then a big business looks and says, hey, you know what, we're not really doing very well in this piece, and these guys are doing the same thing, but they've got thousands of clients. We should absorb them, and that'll really rebuild that arm back up to make it stronger and, of course, worth more value and have more revenues. And that's really how a lot of problems get solved. That's why they always say that the entrepreneur that's in the 40s and 50s tend to have more successful careers in entrepreneurship because they've been through the ringer, they see where the biggest faults are, so they're able to focus, laser focus, on one thing, which is solving that one problem and really doing a great job at it. So the younger entrepreneurs, they're solving maybe auxiliary style problems that they see every day, but they're not solving really those intricate value issues like in brain surgery or other areas where you need a lot of exposure and a lot of experience to, and some may, of course, but that's what the best part of it is that when you can see a problem, you can dive in now and fix it relatively affordable, and big business sees it fixing their problem, and they'll either make a client out of you or they'll absorb you and buy you at some point, and that's really a great outcome.
Right. Awesome. And like, it's really interesting what you're talking about here, because you're talking about a real transition period when the way we talk about these new businesses and the terminology of startups came to be. When we talk about startups, what we're really talking about is like the Silicon Valley style of new business development, high tech, streamlining a certain business process that's been like exported across the world now, mostly due to like these global brands that came out of that, these successes, right? Like Airbnb or Facebook, Google, etc. Right? We use everyone uses it every day. Was there a transition you saw, a period like where you like suddenly people went like rapid period of transition from like these old ways of doing business to these new ways of thinking about new company and new development?
I do think that social media changed a lot of that because, and the news started sharing more ideas.
Yeah.
So I don't think that maybe 20 years ago, things were really below the radar. So when you started a company, it was high secrecy. And now when you start a company, it's not about that anymore. It's about sharing as much as you can.
Absolutely.
Like if I told you 15 years ago that we were running a pitch event and you needed to share your financials and what you were doing, we probably would never have got a company to come out to it because their fear would have been, no, someone's going to steal my idea and build it. And nowadays there's so many ideas, but they're all being facilitated in incubators, accelerators, from home, in garages, and now obviously mainstream in the WeWorks of the world and other platforms that are supporting it, and everybody's open to talk about it. And I think when I started the Open People Network, the name of itself, Open People Network, which seems very odd, you're like, that's a weird name, but it was because I felt that everything was so closed off and you had so many companies doing the exact same thing. So why are we not solving one problem together? Why are we solving one problem, everybody's doing it? It didn't make a lot of sense to me. So I felt, well, if we created something where we could really heavily collaborate and create an openness to it and let everybody in on it so they could watch it on film, they could watch it on social, everywhere else, and come to an event and hear about this company and then interact with them, well, then we'd all know what that one company was doing. So then if I wanted to help, I could jump in and help them, or I could network them to somebody else. Or if I'm going to start a company, why would I want to start something if this guy's doing the same thing or she's doing the same thing? I might as well go work with them or start something that can benefit those companies. So it was really about being more open and sharing ideas so that we didn't have to be so secluded in this silo and then figure out why doesn't anybody like me? Why won't the world work with me? Why is my company not successful? Well, because the more you collaborate, the more you get out there, the more interest you're going to build. So be more open-minded and open yourself up. And then you start to see that change. So I think those types of companies really made the change, but it also the way news started covering startups, they weren't the evil in the room anymore. They became the success. And in the last, I'd say the last 2-3 years, it's really skyrocketed. It is the place to be. It is hot and cool to be an entrepreneur and to be a startup. I think that really helps build a name for what's going on in this space. But now you've also got people that have invested in companies 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and those are starting to come out. So meaning that they're being successful. There's big takeovers happening. So someone that invested in companies 10, 15 years ago, like the Facebook movie and stuff, they're all saying, well, I want to be that guy because that guy just made billions off of a $10 investment. How do I do that? So that's also skyrocketed the space because you never had that before. People just wondered, who are the people investing in all of these Ubers of the world and everybody else? So now it's kind of coming mainstream. So now more people have an interest to be part of that domain.
Great. I mean, I think we need more of this. I think that the beauty of this innovation economy you're seeing is that the more that we have, more entrepreneurs we have, the more ideas trying to be being solved, more money gets put in the system, the more resources get applied to that, and it just kind of builds upon itself, right? It kind of like, it's one of the only things where like competition is good. Right? The more people are providing similar resources or different type of resources or competing for the business of these smaller companies developing, it benefits everybody.
100% agree with that. The interesting piece is that people always ask me, well, are incubators good or accelerators good, or consultants that help in this space? And really, at the end of the day, as an owner, as a CEO of a company, you really have to figure out what makes you tick. But you, at that time, while you're learning that, you're going to start learning the value that everybody else is bringing. And you have to start making decisions if you like X versus B versus C versus D. And those things come from trial and error. You're going to have mentors that are going to help you, which is huge to your growth. But you also have to get as much information in about other companies, other people. And incubators and accelerators all have a huge, huge, huge place in this ecosystem because they actually help you take that idea from something to something more. And then the next group comes in and they help you grow. Whereas we didn't have this 10, 15 years ago. It was just struggle and error, right? And then you figured out where you netted out and you grew your company. So I think all of these facets that have come into the ecosystem certainly help out huge, and they help a company actually grow, which you didn't see before. And yeah, you might fail fast, but you're going to be back in there going at it again and finding something else. And I think that's also a change in the entrepreneur side, is that when something does go wrong, they've got a lot of people in their network to help them pick it back up and go. And if they don't, there's not a shortage of ideas, and these entrepreneurs are right back on the horse going at it again. So it's a pretty amazing ecosystem and world for sure.
No, absolutely. Let's talk about that point where, so we've been seeing Loblaws and helping these large corporation deal startups to where you are right now, or running Open People Network. What was that? Like you were a founder yourself, right? You had that software development company.
For sure.
Was that the main thing you did between that time?
It is. I've owned the software company and still do. We have for 13 years. In our investment vehicles, we've created basically 3 shells that occur to help startups. We do splits inside of software. So if we can work with that company and see that the owners can grow the business, we'll do an investment through the software side. So we split it 60-40, wherever the number works out. So there's an equity piece. And it comes from the fund, so that gives them that value, and on the cap table it looks good. It's part of our fund, so if we're going to invest there at the early stage, we'll invest again from our fund side. So the supporters fund was the vehicle 2. We wanted to stop being just me investing, that we put it into a pool. So we brought in a lot of like-minded investors that have pooled into it, and then we go out and working with all these companies, we find the companies that we think we can help expand and grow with, and we invest on that side. So. And then, of course, 3 is the pitch series, where that is what gives us the ability to showcase all of these great companies. And they're all great. We work with so many companies, and it's awesome to see the success rate and just the growth that they've been able to accomplish. And to me, that's amazing in itself. So when you tie all these 3 things in together, I think that's kind of helped support our base. And that's what allowed me to be on an entrepreneurial side, on the Hardboot software side, as I grew that company and built it out. I started to see a lot bigger ways to help other people do the same thing. And there became more vehicles as well from funding. I never took funding when I started the company. I just jumped right into it. And I started to see what things I wasn't good at and what things I didn't really focus on. And one of those was taking investment. So when people come to you and say, I was told I shouldn't take money, I've heard that a lot. And I said, yeah, you know what? I went through the same dilemma when I started my company. I always asked, thought about it, questioned it. And what I came back with is that what I think is the best thing is if you're looking to expand and grow your company and grow at a faster rate because it's a land grab or it's a speed to market and you want to accelerate the growth of your company, take funding and make sure that the vehicle of funding works for you and you're happy with it, so that when you grow the business, you're still in control of your business in the end, and you're able to make the decisions, choices you need to continue growing.
What kind of structuring would you recommend for like most companies? Do you have a structure that you go through?
We do. It's different for everybody.
Yeah.
But I think, again, it depends on what stage you come in at, if you're pre-seed, seed, Series A. And there's people that will help you along the way. What I recommend any startup does, and this is the hard part, is you're trying to build a company and then you got to go learn how finance works. But I would focus time to learn how finance works. The last thing you want to do is get had by someone giving you 10 grand for 20% of your company and find that they brought no value and now you're out by a chunk of your equity in your company. So I would ask people, and again, get data around all of it to come up with the choice that is best for you. You wouldn't go and put your money in somewhere without talking to a bunch of different people. So it's the same thing. Don't take money from a bunch of different people without talking to people and come up with what you feel. Go with your gut, but go with you think is best. And there are organizations and businesses out there that will help you steer you in the right spot. But if you have 12 people come and tell you one thing, and then it doesn't work out, or 12 people tell you the opposite things, you really do have to define it and figure out what's best for you and that investment. So money makes people crazy, but at the same time, you got to figure out what's best and ask a lot of questions. And do try and get more educated on the investment vehicles, so you don't have to wait till your second company to do it.
Yep.
You can do it the first time.
Yep.
And that's where we try to come in, because we really, again, openness, we want to make sure that all the startups get what they're looking for, but everybody wins. Because if you lose your steam because you're unhappy with your investment, then you're going to fold the company, and then we all lose. So why would we want to make sure that it's a bad deal? We want to make sure everybody wins. So.
Absolutely. One of the biggest struggles, when I first started my first tech startup, 2013, there were no real resources available, and even less resources available at the legal side, right? How do you get these kind of financing rounds? What are the different types of structures? It was a point where Google searches were not pulling up anything, even, right? And to even the main issue as a founder is you go through is unknown unknowns. What you don't even know, you don't know, so you don't even know how to search for it.
Yep.
Right? You're going into this darkness looking for the light, but you're struggling around. And I ran into something called the Startup Playbook, which is a US-based book. It talked about the actual legal side,
Okay.
How to finance deals, how to structure a company. And it was mostly all based on the US side of it, but at least it gave me a structure to actually have conversations.
Yep.
But nowadays, a Google search will field you a lot of results. YouTube search will, the Virginia Law School has the entire legal program online now on YouTube. It's crazy. If you want to delve into that.
Oh, for sure.
But with startups, with financing, if you in particular, there's all these people that put up, these are templates. Law firms will put up, this is a template, this is what we use,
For
right?
sure.
This is what we recommend, and you can just download them and plug and play and start building off of that. I mean, do you recommend companies to follow that kind of route, to use these templates, find an actual lawyer early on and spend that capital? Have you gone that struggle yourself? What have you seen?
For sure. Interesting on my side was that when I started my software company, there was a lawyer that became my mentor at the time. And he was an awesome guy. So he basically told me, I need to be your mentor. And I said, okay, fair enough.
Okay.
I didn't know I needed one, but I'm in.
Yep.
And he was awesome. He steered the ship quite well, put me in front of lawyers that understood the space. And 12 years ago, the space wasn't very knowledgeable, I guess, in startups. And then throughout time, I brought in different mentors that work with me as well in the spaces that I felt I wasn't proficient at. And over time, when we created the whole Open People Network side of things, we went to the partners that worked with us, and we said, how can we help all the startups together so that those startups feel comfortable, and we can do all the pre-work and all the heavy lifting. So we brought in companies like Miller Thompson on the legal side. They work heavily in the startup space, and they are huge supporters of the Open People Network, but they also came into our fund. So that was a good reason to work with them.
Yep.
And also on the same thing, like One Core Media, marketing side, they came into the fund to support that avenue. The same with Bateman McKay on the accounting side. They came into the fund. And the whole reason was that we wanted to build our own little ecosystem of real, true supporters that would help those startups.
Okay.
And as you mentioned, like going online and finding that information, 100,000% go out, learn, find it, research it, watch YouTube, listen to podcasts. There is so much information out there. At least get knowledgeable enough that, as they say, so you can be dangerous, because that's what you need, which just means you can question everything that's in front of you. And then go to the businesses, the incubators, accelerators, and everything else, and find out why they want to offer you this. Find out why this is the value, and learn from that to make that better choice going forward. But the first thing you got to do is you got to learn at least something. You know, you didn't just pick up a bike and ride it.
Yep.
You know, your parents taught you how to get on the bike and what you needed to do, hopefully. And then from there you fell, you got back up until you were good at it. So the same thing has to happen in anything you do in life, is learn, figure it out, and go forward.
Absolutely. And what do you recommend for the people that don't necessarily have the mentors, the parental figure to like handhold them and be like, this is what you should look for, not look for? And generally, that's what you see. Most people don't have the right mentorship networks in place, especially when you're coming from like outside the downtown core. I've noticed if you're working downtown, you get access to so many like people just from the central activities that happen. Right? You can go to an event and connect. But if you go from the suburbs or like anything like outside of the city core, it becomes really hard to find the right types of mentorship that actually know what's going on. And the further out you go, the harder it gets. And with the age of the internet, these resources are available. But what do you recommend for them?
I think to recommend when you're outside the big major city centers, a lot of smaller towns and cities are building incubators and accelerators now.
Yep.
They see the value because they don't want their communities to shrink into nothing and everybody move to the big cities. So they're starting to build up accelerators or incubators in their town. So the town of Whitby, they just created a new incubator space.
Yep.
They're everywhere. And the reason these towns and cities are starting to see a huge value of way of giving back to the community, using the taxpayer dollars to support a building, support educators in the space, and they're a big help. So there is that resource. And if you don't have parents or entrepreneurial parents or people that have that background, one thing that I learned a long time ago, and this happened to be started from my father, and I certainly push this out a lot, is when I was applying for a job, I think I was 13, and I was going to apply for a job at McDonald's. And my father said, go in and ask for the manager. And I said, ask for the manager? Man, that's freaky. Why would I want to do that?
Yeah.
And he said, well, you need to make an impression. There's thousands of other people going in and asking or putting in their application. You need to stand out. So go in and speak to the manager, introduce yourself, shake his hand, wear a tie, look appropriate, and stand out, and ask him and tell him that you'll work for him for a week for free until you, and that you want to start right away. And I'm like, free? I'm 13. Why do I work for free? I don't want to work for free. And he said, no, it's not about the fact that you're going to work for free. It's about the fact that you're willing to show them how hard you're going to work, and you're willing to do it for nothing. And the reason why I come back with that is that even when I do help mentor with businesses, I'll tell them the same philosophy around that is get inside of a big business, go introduce yourself to people, stand out. I tell some of the youth that I work with, I'm like, you want a costume? They're like, yeah, well, I want a banana outfit. Perfect. Put it on, put a shirt and tie on underneath it, ask for the manager with your application. Well, why would I want to show up as a banana? Because he's going to remember you. She's going to remember you.
Yep.
So as soon as you shake that hand, unzip the banana costume, pull it down to your waist, whatever, and say, hey, my name's Bob, my name's Sarah, I'm looking for a job. Well, now you stand out amongst the crowd, and people are going to want to work with you because you're creative and you've done some great things. On the other side of it is, where am I looking for mentorship? If there's a business that you find in your community that's doing a great job, go in and tell them, I'm interested to run a business and I need to learn from somebody. You're the CEO of X company. Maybe it's in lumber, maybe it's in whatever. I'm looking for mentorship. I guarantee that person's going to help you because you went out of your way to hunt them down and learn something about them and their business, and you're willing to learn from them. Everybody's willing to teach if you ask.
Yep.
And that's probably the easiest way to get mentorship in a small town, is find somebody in the town that you like that does something that's similar to what you're looking to do. Even if it's the opposite end of what you like to do, you're going to get some learning. They had to do sales, they had to do accounting, they had to do everything to grow a business. They're the perfect person to speak to.
No, absolutely. It's the same thing, like same kind of sentiment. Like I'm always astounded by how willing most people are to help you out just by asking. The power of the ask.
Totally.
Right? It's just so out there. Now it's becoming more and more accessible. you're absolutely right. These regional incubators coming in and more resources coming in, it just comes at availability of knowledge, and the knowledge transfer is there. But one of the things I talk to people who work at these regional innovation centers is like, go downtown. I mean, it's such a different community downtown where people are much more interconnected. Everyone there seems to know each other. But that's where all the financial sector, the actual financial support is, the actual heavy-duty resources that's going to take your business to another level. And that's kind of the daunting task I've seen is like from the regional innovation centers, people to just go downtown and to connect. Because one of the fundamental differences of the culture downtown is that people seem to all know each other, right? Let's talk about yourself. Like, you live in Ajax in Durham. You always live. Are you from Toronto? You live here?
I grew up outside of it in a small town which is called Port Elgin or Southport, which is three hours from here. North
Okay.
Of here.
Whereby? Like?
It's near Owen Sounds.
Okay. Yeah.
Sawa Beach. I grew up in but I moved when I was younger to play hockey, so
Yep.
I ended up living in small cities and towns in the area.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that a lot of, I've really thought about what allows for someone to have the successes or the forward thinking to see where you're going to end up. I think a lot of this has to come down to perseverance and drive.
Yeah.
I think there's one thing that kind of can put things on a slower trajectory, which is, if you use that term, the helicopter parents, that they come in and they do everything and they help everything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the student, the youth tend to then always look for that helping hand, and they forget that they have that helping hand. They are the driver. They're the ones that have the tenacity and the drive and the persistence to succeed. So I think if you start to look at what creates this entrepreneur, sure, the Durham region, everybody might say go downtown. I have a feeling they don't. They want to keep you there because they want to grow with you. But if they do say go downtown, or you start to go downtown and see that it's a total different mix, well, it's also a different mix in speed, how fast people might work in one area versus the other. They might say, and I have no idea if this is the case. I wouldn't separate it this way. I think it's just a knowledge base of what your perception is on who grows faster. Maybe in the Toronto community, people are networking much quicker and faster because they only got to walk 5 minutes to meet each other, versus when they're in outside regions, they have to drive and they have to go a little further. So maybe they're not meeting as quickly. But at the end of the day, people want to drive business. They want to grow. They want to move fast.
Yep.
I think there's this talk of fail fast and all this other junk. I think that if you're passionate about something and you're excited, and I'll go to you on when your first business or your second business, or even now all of this what you're doing, you don't look at what the fail is. Why do I want to look at what the failure rate is? I want to look at what the success rate is. And when you're under pressure, you're going to go even harder to succeed because you don't want to fail. Your brain just doesn't have fail in it. So as an entrepreneur, you have to take that perseverance and drive and use that to get you going forward. Use the other pieces as being ways to support you, but don't use it as your only base to grow. You're an entrepreneur. You got to be efficient. You got to find stuff online. You got to find ways to create sales. You got to network your ass off. You may not like it. You might not be the best, but who cares? That's the whole reason why you're doing this. If you're not going to be that way, then go take a regular job and just work with people inside the business and do that, which is a great thing too. We don't want to forget that big businesses where they are because great people work inside of them. Small businesses are great because that entrepreneur drives the hell out of it. And if you stop driving, you're going to falter, and that's where things fail. So you have to keep up that persistence to grow.
Absolutely, and it's one of the founder responsibilities is to keep that vision alive and just move and make those incremental steps towards it.
Yep. And shift too, right?
Yeah.
You got to pivot. Nothing's perfect. You're going to move and you're going to shake. And I ask you, like on your first business, when you were doing this, you probably didn't have the resources. So you were just like, oh my God, what do I do? You're faced with a problem. You didn't sit back and say, oh man, someone's going to come fix this. Yeah. You jump right into it. Or did you jump into it and say, you know what, if I don't do this tomorrow, I'm going to fail. And I refuse to take a fail on my record because I got to drive this.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the main reasons to love what you do, because that really drives it forward. Like, I love doing this. So like, I want to keep doing this. So these are the things I have to do to keep this thing alive so I can keep doing what I do. I think that's one of the main driving forces for me. Like,
did you have mentors? Did you do things with mentors? Like you were always having to have one, so you're like, you know what, I got a problem, I got to ask this question.
Yes, absolutely. Started from when I was 17, and I noticed exactly what you did. Ask, and people are so willing, especially when you're young. people look at you like, wow, you're how old and you're doing what? I wish I want to do that, and they just want to give back. Like one of the biggest moments at 17 was meeting like a regional manager of like a bank, and he oversaw all these different banks, and we just asked him, it's like, hey, can we get like 5 minutes to understand how like finance works? Because I was 17, running with like a grade 11 like knowledge of accounting, like one accounting course that I took in grade 11, and I just want to know, how do we track this stuff? How do you do this stuff? And he sat down for like 2 hours.
That's the best 5 minutes ever then.
Yeah, exactly. He sat down, gave his time. He's like, you guys are doing what? Okay, what's your business plan? Like, how are you doing this? That's how you track this. That's how the bank will look at it. And he sat down and told us all this different information. And it's like, it wasn't even the knowledge. The fact that it was so willing made me want to go and ask for more.
So did you?
Yeah, I've always been asking, right? I just keep asking because I'm like, this is what I want to do. This is what I do. Can you help me, right? And even like, I don't think even age is a big difference there, because people have learned and moved differently. Like I've noticed now, I'm 29, but like there's 26-year-olds who have built like $8 million, $10 million businesses that have came out of the hub over here, and I go to them now, and I'm like, like, what do you think about this idea? Like I validate it off them, even though like when they were a younger age, or like when they first started off, I was mentoring them.
Mm-hmm.
They are so past their growth, and because they understand that the field they're in, they're now great drivers of that knowledge. And I think that's what it is, connected to other brains, right? People who have experienced different things and being able to absorb all that. When you're trying to build a business, what you're really trying to do is create a vehicle to solve a particular problem. It's a whole beast that you're building. And if you really love that problem, it's got to exist outside of yourself, outside of your fears, outside of your anxieties. If you truly want to see it succeed, you got to love it. And for it to love, it's got to be a separate entity from yourself. And the ability to step out of your comfort zone, I think it's helped by like your need and want to build that vision that you see in your head. And for me, that's been like the biggest driving force, right? Like doing the business I've had tremendous personal growth, because it's forced me to jump into my comfort zone. Like having conversations with people like you, sitting down. Like 10 years ago, you tell me that I'll be having conversations with people. I was not the most communicative person. We talked about this before we jump in, how like I got into sales, and it was like amazing, a way to make some money, focusing on a skill set I didn't know that I can apply it now to get the revenue to build businesses that I wanted to do. And that transited into something like this, where I got into the love of talking to people who have gone through great journeys, who have created cool things, or in the process of creating cool things, or support other people do cool things, and just breaking that down. I just learned and love that. So, I mean, with the BloomX podcast, what it's all about is just, how do I get a vehicle for myself, more than anything else, a little selfish for myself, just to have these to have these talks as much as I can. And my hope is that, my tenacity of like actually wanting to do this, me loving the fact that I have these conversations, drives such good conversation that brings in the traffic to keep all the lights on, to keep this going.
And how much do you equate that to being focused on the delivery of a great product or a great solution or a great experience, but being focused on one thing, which is interviews and great content? You could be doing a million other things right now, but you're really focused. So
Absolutely.
If you were yourself back on your first company to your second company, was the real winner on all of this the fact that you were focused on solving one problem and getting everybody around you and helping you solve that problem? Or was it 50,000 things you were doing and trying to solve the one problem, but you had 50 other ones to do and just took your focus off?
Yeah, I mean, so with this, this kind of grew out of this instance, like I wanted to bring in cool people into a front room. So when we first started the BloomX podcast, like back in March, I talked to the Hub's director here, Gray, and I'm like, I wanted to launch 3 tests. I want to run pitch competitions, I want to run a podcast out of the space, and I want to run meetups. I want to see what the best mechanism could be to bring in cool people into a room. Pitch competition, bring in cool companies, maybe a few investors sit on the judging panel to judge, like similar to what OPN does, right?
Yeah.
That brings in cool people that can now are building companies or investing in companies that can talk to. Meetups, okay, we use students who want to learn things, founders who want to build things, bring them all into a room, get them open to talk about things. Well, we can bring in a keynote speaker now, or like a panel discussion. That becomes another vehicle to bring in and have these kind of discussions. Then came the podcast. Out of all 3 of them, the podcast became the best vehicle. right? So we started with 3 different vehicles to get the end result, which is how do we get cool people into a room, right? That we can have these discussions with, that we can now have an open discussion with, like build a community around. And the podcast became the easiest, not just easiest, most effective way, right? We have these one-to-one long-form discussions, put it up online. We put it up mostly on YouTube and LinkedIn. Everyone always gets at me, why is it on Facebook? Why is it on Twitter? Why is it on this? I'm like, you know what? I'm not focused too hard on the delivery. I just want to create really good content. I'm not in a rush. I can always produce, we can always set it out on different platforms. Next step is actually to break it down into smaller clips that we can disseminate in smaller forms so people can see 1 minute, 5 minute, 10-minute discussions.
Find the most valuable pieces and then start to push those out.
Exactly. And everyone's on me, it's like, why aren't you focused on this? What about your viewers? What about the numbers? Are you doing ads? And I'm like, I'm not doing any of that. I'm focused on, bringing filtering out the best people. Like, our guest list now has grown to about 189 people, right? And we've been doing this for 2.5 months now.
Yep.
And we're picking and choosing between that.
Sounds like you're going to cut a few people just so you can get yourself to your next interview. You're like, okay, I got 100 for next week.
Yeah.
How am I going to make this work?
Exactly. And it's like, okay, how do we pick the right person to do that? And it also happens about timing too. Because a lot of people, we have like Sarah Nam from like Lever, who's like runs a $200 million company, and she's down to come on and talk about how she started this company. But timing, right? When can we get there? We talked to Andrew D'Souza from Clearbank. Right, I met Andrew like 5 years ago at an event, and he remembers me from that, and he agreed to come on. And again, timing, right? So it is about timing as well. It's a big factor. So one of the main things we want to do is take this and move it closer to the downtown core, like maybe North York area even, closer to the subway station. Because a lot of people I notice from downtown, they don't drive anymore. They Uber or transit.
Well, they don't go past Bloor, so you're
exactly.
already going to have a tough spot there, right?
Exactly, right? So make it more accessible.
But people still love that aspect, and it's never hard to find people that want to talk about themselves, I guess, to that capacity and share, because we all have an innate ability to want to share something that we're doing.
Yeah.
And you touched on one thing that's fascinating. You said that everybody's telling you to do this. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? That's one thing that you'll have a lot of in startup world, where people are always telling you things. And how do you actually get through that? Because your mind's telling, wait, I've done this. I've had 3 companies. Let me figure this out. What's making you decide that as everybody's telling you to run ads and tell you to cut this and change this, what's keeping you focused so that you don't do all those other things and find, man, I'm swamped. This is really choking me and I'm not having fun anymore. What's allowing you to kind of wiggle your way through to get to the end with all this noise that's happening?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, it's become like the ability, the filter that focus is so important. And I come from past failures, right? 3 companies that blew up my face in different ways. I started my first business when I was 17, like I mentioned, but I started 3 companies before I turned 25. The first company failed.
That's amazing, by the way. Most people haven't even started one company by the time they're 25.
Thank you. Like, the first company failed out of success. We had too much traction that it blew up in our faces. This is before smartphones. We couldn't track things properly. And we were too young. We were moving. The company was on a rocket ship that we couldn't hold on to, and it blew up in our face. And that always scarred me. I never wanted that to repeat again, because I had to let go of people who were like double my age that I was employing. I remember that one conversation I had with somebody who now is like, "What do I do with my mortgage?" Right? And I'm like, "Holy crap! I didn't even, what have I done?"
It creates a lot of stress for sure.
And so ever since then, so many lessons learned, right? So for me now, it's about streamlining. Okay, I have only so much focus. There's 2 ways to do that. Run constant tests, see what's working, what's not working, and filter out ideas as fast as possible. And 2 is to find the right people who can now champion existing processes. And that's been building this great team that we have here. Henry helps us run sales and operations. He gets people in like you, gets you organized and gets you set up so you know what you expect.
Gets you excited to be here too, right?
Absolutely.
And that high energy makes a big difference.
Absolutely, and Henry's great at that. Right? We have Pradeep from Toronto Film School. He makes films. So when I first brought this idea to him, he just knew exactly, okay, what type of lights to use, what type of camera setup from this kind of type of few ways, how the editing process should work, and I knew none of that. So he just streamlined. He was the one who figured out, okay, this is how the edit should look like. This is how long it takes to actually edit a video if it's filmed in 4K. Right? It takes 12 hours to compile sometimes.
Wow.
Right? Just after they're done the edits for it to become into one video. Then Kasem, who came in and helped solve our audio problem, right? The first time we did this, the audio didn't record, and we had all this wasted footage. Now he came in to help us set up, 2-3 different sources of audio recording, right? There are 3 sources of audio recording now that gets compiled by a program later by the best audio for audio, but he's dedicated just to the audio to make sure that's crisp.
Awesome.
And that all came out of, okay, let's do this first, learn from the mistakes, and then fill those blanks in by testing by different various solutions. Whatever works, we double down on that. And that's part of it, what I've been focusing my team on. I'm like, okay, let's test out, okay, throw out new ideas. I accept as many new ideas as possible.
Yeah.
From that, I put in, okay, what's need to have, a nice want, and later on, we can apply on. And then
So you
how do
always
we
have a
test that?
vision. You always know those next steps.
Yeah.
And all this other stuff that's kind of beating around the outside, you're like, okay, I'll listen, but unless it's fitting into these steps, I don't have time. I got to get to here.
Absolutely. And one of the hardest things is to communicate that. I think my biggest job is like, okay, where are we going and how are we getting there? What is this vision? And what the executable step to get there is. And when you're a founder, you don't necessarily know that, right? You don't necessarily know yet. You're kind of building as it goes on, and as you learn new information as you do things,
Yeah.
that kind of changes. Like you said, it pivots.
Yeah.
And that's really hard for a lot of people, right? Like my wife, she doesn't like hearing about what I do anymore. Because I talk about a hard pivot like it's nothing. Oh yeah, that idea was last week. No, this week we're testing this out.
Yeah.
And she's just frustrated. She's like, I thought you were doing this now.
Yeah.
What do you mean you're doing like podcasts, right? What happened to those meetups? And I'm like, oh, we don't do that anymore.
It is a whole changes a lot of stress.
Yes.
And for someone that's more fluid in it, because you can't see the dollars, you can't see the value coming from
Yeah.
it. If you don't make that change, then you go into stress mode and you're like, something's not working, I got to make this change. So that hard cutoff or quick transition is very smart. So do you find that you're more fluid now? And do you also think that in this whole journey that you've gone on in the last, since you were 17, so 15 years, give or take, because I'm sure you didn't just become an entrepreneur at 17, you were probably doing other stuff at 15 and all the way through. So in that time period that you were going through this, did you see that you're reinventing yourself every time you start something new?
Absolutely, because I guess I was haunted by the pain of the past failure. I never want that to repeat. So I became like a sponge. I'm like, I need to soak as much as possible. But then became like, how do you refine what works or not? So being able to test things by deploying things rapidly. Like my family is frustrated. They're like, what are you doing now? Like you're doing all these different things. I'm like, no, I'm doing this one thing. I'm just testing on multiple things to how to get there, right? You're running a marathon and you tune in at one stage, and now I'm doing like a triathlon, a completely different thing, but you're going toward the same goal point.
So there'll be a point where you actually start running in a straight line.
Exactly.
Right now you're kind of doing this.
Exactly.
And you're like, I'm still going to get there, but it just might take me a little longer because I'm going to learn and test things as I go.
Absolutely. And for me, even to communicate that vision, what this is about. For me, I sorely hate the kind of society that puts you in a bubble in. The idea of sitting in a classroom in school and this is what you're doing, this is what you think, this is what acceptable lines of boundaries are. From there, go into this 9 to 5 job where you had to learn all you had to apply yourself at this level. Take that time, slowly grow your way up. I hated everything about that so much.
Yeah.
I loved the idea of this new.
But that drove you too, right?
Yeah. The hate of that drove me to be I need to fix something else out. Something I can build for myself that drives me forward, focus towards. And that's what business has always been about, being able to be a change maker.
Yep.
I see these kind of problems, I really hate that problem, let's solve those problems. There's financial rewards that come out of that can be applied to solve other things. And I really love other people who do these things as well. And one of the things I'm on right now is how can we make that painless as possible? Remove the pain of just starting up and moving things forward. Because I experience that a lot. Learning the unknown unknowns through failure and wasted resource. I'm like, how can you make it easier for founders to start and move forward? I'm like, that pain point itself should be solved, right? And for me now, it's about disseminating information. So the BloomX podcast is about. So bringing in people and giving people like me, I learned so much through YouTube. Sometimes I just have a video playing. Y Combinator has the entire, a series of lectures on there.
It becomes white noise almost in a way. You just have it always playing. It's always running. You're getting something from it, like a TED Talk or something.
Yeah, TED Talks, audiobooks. I'm always having these vehicles to learn something. So I wanted to be a content producer where I'm like, okay, let's create this hyper-focused content. We focus on founders and their journeys. Other people can model themselves over. that would help me. So that's one way of doing it. So I guess my long-term vision is how do we decrease the cost of startup? That's a great problem set, and there's a great bunch of financial rewards in doing that. I mean, and part of that is like I know I follow all these different things, like what Andrew Yang is trying to do with UBI, like universal basic income, right? How all these tech companies and all these big companies are seeing this, and they're like, yeah, this makes sense. The idea to give everyone like not just like a social net, but like right now you start off with like a net neutral income, right? You spend money to live, but you have to make income to live, right? But what if you can make everyone's income level a net positive? You know, $1,000 a month coming in no matter what, and you can distribute it whatever it is, the way you want. You can choose how much that goes into the cost of living, how much you focus on personal development, whatever all that is. It changes people's mindset to be like, okay, I don't necessarily need to exchange labor for work. I can create these asset classes or these companies or these vehicles to get income for me that can give me more resources to buy more things, which not necessarily help increase their the cost of their value of living or their, what that is, but.
Well, there's an alteration to this too, is that it's universal thinking that's changing the way the world works. It's not one individual making the call that nobody likes. It's more people coming in with ideas, filtering them through, and everybody getting the choice to make that decision on how to help float that idea together. I think that changes the way the world, but also businesses operate. So you can have universal income and ways to balance out the ecosystem of growth as a human being, because you've got more ideas coming to the pool versus, you know, we all have to wait for one person to make that choice. And I think that that's where the big problem lied, is that one person can't possibly make all the choices for everything down here because they're getting too many of them. So how do we all work to build those up so that when that one choice is, it's easier to make because we've already been doing it together? And that is a tough way of looking at things. But the more people you can get behind that cause or get behind that stream of thinking, you're going to get way smarter solutions that come out of it. And less control, because the control gets balanced out by everybody. And it's fascinating, but that's how the internet kind of works. You know, trolls and everybody get filtered out because the better of the people are in there managing it. So if you get more people to manage their own stuff, eventually you'll get more things growing and ideas filtering into bigger, more productive ways. So kind of like the movement right now that you have on climate change, that was one person making the drive and becoming the voice, but now you've got people all over the world that are supporting that drive. So now everybody's floating it up, and it'll become a reality. So, and that's the same thing with startups. The whole ecosystem is that the more people that help and support those startups, then the better off we are. And I know there's always this exit plan. There always doesn't have to be an exit, but then it becomes a lifestyle business per se. But also the good thing is that if 97% of the world's made up of startups, don't you think we should support the startup community a little bit stronger? Because there's only 3% of big companies that can buy the small companies, so then you need more big companies. So shouldn't we be trying to build a few more big companies so that, or merging companies together so that you can start to allow for more of that ecosystem to get built up? Because I'm sure there's going to be stats coming out eventually that the more startups, founders that sell companies will spend their next 20, 30 years of life giving back to what they built the first time, because they feel the need to support the system and help it grow. Kind of like what you're doing. You went through 3 companies and now you're doing something that helps you give back, which means that you see the value in helping others get to where you got to, and vice versa. We have very similar backgrounds. We're doing the same thing, right? We're both trying to figure out how can we help this community grow, and that comes by socializing and networking more with all walks of life and tying them all into the same charge so that they will eventually feel the same thing and say, hey, you know what, you're doing a really good thing here. Maybe I should think about giving back somehow. You know, maybe I'll donate my time on a weekend to a charity, whatever that might be. But I think a lot more people that get into this type of atmosphere that what you're building are going to have more interest to do it once they're exposed to it.
No, absolutely. And I mean, you tied on a great point there. I mean, one of my secret goals here with this is also to.
I like secrets. I like secrets.
Yeah, of course. is help boost like the Scarborough community.
Okay.
Because if you live in the GTA, one of the frustrating things is when you from Scarborough, is Scarborough's almost weirdly ignored. Like if you go to the CAMH building, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, their map of Toronto doesn't even have Scarborough on it.
What?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's almost like an ignored part of the city. So growing up from Scarborough,
It's kind of odd. I didn't think that would even be possible. How do you not draw that in?
it's 1/3 of this like the city size.
Yeah.
Is missing from the map, right?
Weird.
And like even when growing up in Scarborough, like me and Henry talked about this a lot. We went to the same high school in Warden Finch, and it's like you don't see much of people doing things that we want to do. Like like when I grew up, I wanted to go into like high finance, like venture capital, or like buying and selling these companies that we hear about on TV, but no one worked in that kind of industry.
Yep.
Scarborough's mostly been like an immigrant community who has been developing. Now it's been developed, and one of the things we have now is like all these smart minds in these immigrant communities in Scarborough now work in the core or other in companies outside of Scarborough. And Scarborough is not really developed as like more an innovation in tech or anything like that. Yet we occupy a lot of the land value. And you see like York region developed the high tech capital of Canada already existing, now having their hub. Even Durham has a lot of resources going towards like new company development and startups.
They've pushed really hard. So
they push really
the
hard.
last couple of years, things have started to push the needle out there for sure.
Absolutely. But Scarborough, there's no real movement here.
Yeah.
There's no real step. But we're surrounded by all this high tech startup communities. So our goal is kind of become the bridge gap, kind of bridge communities from the downtown core, from the West End, from York region, from Durham, kind of pull them over here and be like, hey, look,
we exist. We're here, man. We're here. We're doing
happening.
Stuff.
Right? And the hub, the UTSC here, is only the real innovation kind of center for Scarborough. And we really want to be trying to highlight that, talk about that. I mean, they're mentioned here, the sponsor, right? But like, yeah, I mean, there needs to be more of that kind of innovation, because 5 years ago, when I first got in tech in 2013, not a lot of diversity, right? And whether it's in startups, especially when it comes to VCs or the capital, like you go to any like national business technology conference or discovery conference or any of these conferences that spotlight new companies and the capital for new companies and pitch competitions, no diversity. But flash forward to 2019, it's crazy. The amount of women, right, are involved in startups and tech, right? The amount of minorities are involved, right? It's been a crazy transformation. And that's really one of the things that I really enjoy seeing about the startup community, is how embracing they are of what's different, right? Like Latin American, they bring in Latin American companies to Toronto and introduce them, and they're doing so well and being so accepted by the community. And like how Toronto's become like a place where it's more of a conservative banking town, where everyone's kind of hyper-focused on themselves and, staying in your lane, to now be like, I'm willing to help you. Let's all come together. You're building a cool idea. I don't really care where you came from. This idea is great. It can solve these problems. How can we work together?
I think it's a lot of the time was maybe media caused it, but everybody was always focused on helping everybody outside of us. So everybody wants to donate money to a foreign country when they're having issues, but they don't look internally to find out all the problems that we're having. So like exclusion of Scarborough, why isn't it part of it? Why isn't it getting the same love as York or Durham or anybody else? And I think it's just bad perception that was built around that. And now you're able to do stuff like you are in the Scarborough area, being at the U of T campus here, but starting to put more legs behind it. Start saying, hey man, we exist, we're here, we're doing great things. I remember 30 years ago, Jane and Finch was a bad area. Well, Jane and Finch isn't really a bad area anymore. It's actually pretty vibrant, doing really well. It looks nice. They renovated the hell out of it. But that's the same thing as all the bad spots in Toronto. They've all been redone, renovated, and starting to bolster up, and they're putting in innovation centers in there. So I think it's just a matter of putting some legs behind the Scarborough side and saying, hey, we're big, we're part of Toronto. We've got a lot of legs. We look better, and we're better than Mississauga. I don't know, there's a little competition going on. But finding what that is that makes you guys great and utilizing your podcast as a way of driving that out, right? There's a lot of facilities in Scarborough. There's amazing restaurants all over the place that are tucked in. But I don't think people have really took the value out of Scarborough. They just said, oh man, 20 years ago I was told Scarborough was not a very good place. Then they never looked at that there's actually a lot of value here and there's a lot of good things happening. And I think maybe somebody like yourself is blasting that out there and telling people that you're going to get more people supporting it too, right? It just takes time, I guess, like anything.
Absolutely.
But in time it'll happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, we really diverged a little bit from our initial conversation. So let's tie back that while we close up. So Open People Network, you guys have recurring events, which is really cool, and you do it very frequently, almost every 2 weeks to every month, right?
We do, yeah. Because we're partnered with York, Durham, and Seneca, because we're part of those communities, and if you will, they renew our partnership every year, and we make sure that we build programs with them. And they run their startups through us too, which is phenomenal. So they actually open their startups to us, which we find obviously super helpful because it helps us give them exposure. So just like Scarborough could do, they could say, hey, we've got these businesses that are running in here, we want to give exposure, and that's what we look for, is businesses that we can help grow with and get them out there pitching, because that's exposure. That's getting you on video. And one of the biggest things that startups may find tough is that the more you give and tell everybody about yourself, the more interest you're going to drive. So market yourself, do little videos, do things where people can do a search and find you somewhere so they can see that you're sustainable, that you've got growth and you've got potential, because people want to get behind that type of thing. If you stay in the dark, no one knows, then it's tough for that to happen. So the more exposure we can do, we created events that run continuously. Obviously, the events expand throughout the entire year, and we try to do at least 1 or 2 a month. Sometimes we're doing 4, and that is a lot more work, but at the same time, it is amazing feeling when you leave the room at the end of a pitch night and you just had 7 awesome companies pitch, and people coming up to you saying, that was so exciting, I saw this great company, I didn't even know they could do this. And I leave like it's goosebumps every day, because and even though I work with them, it's different when someone comes up to you after and says, I got to see something really cool. And that's why we keep doing it. We love what we do, and we love exposing these great companies. So.
That's amazing. And so we'll end off with a message. Like, if anyone is looking to pitch, this is definitely a place to be. I really love the fact that you guys are regular, so people can come back again.
For sure.
Right? Sometimes we see companies come back again and again and refine their pitch. I really love the fact that you provide a venue for that. That's already lacking. And we hope that maybe with our help we can get into Scarborough. Right?
We would love to do things like that. It's I wouldn't say we're always looking to get into every spot and run pitch events, because that's a lot of time and effort, but we are looking at the model where somebody might run an OPN pitch event in their community, but they run it, and they run it under our banner, and we help support them in every way. We are looking at different ways to expand that.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, we're continuing to create great partnerships with great local companies and local businesses, all the way from big venues like Fireside, where we go there every year and we support them, and that's an entrepreneurial weekend. Those are the things that we want to do, is tie ourselves in heavily in the community, so that the community will come to us when they're looking to raise and get exposure, and then we become that vehicle to push out to all the angel groups and push out to the rest of the community. Hey, we've got the best startups, come take a look at what we're doing.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. Thank you for coming on, Jeff.
No, I appreciate it, man. It was awesome.
Great.
Yeah, no.
Thank you, guys.